I'm Ashley Fox, and this is OUTFOXED. David Aldridge has spent more than 30 years in sports media, reporting on the National Basketball Association, among other things, for Turner, ESPN, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and the Washington Post. Currently a senior columnist for The Athletic, Aldridge is a native and lifelong resident of Washington, D.C., father of 2 boys, and husband. And my personal favorite from Aldridge's impressive resume is that he is the sideline reporter on NBA 2K, which makes him animated DA. And he is the author of a forthcoming book, Basketball 100, due out on November 26, 2024. Welcome, David Aldridge. I want to read something you wrote when you announced that you were joining The Athletic in 2018 that struck me. You said when you were 8 years old, a teacher wanted you to submit a poem to Ebony magazine, but you declined, and thus began a series of fear-based questions in life. Do you ask a girl out? Do you learn how to swim? Do you try out for the football team? And you wrote, quote, "In my youth, the answer almost always was no. The fear of losing or being rejected was greater to me than the potential of winning. When you're shy, you don't put yourself out there very often." And I found this fascinating for a number of reasons, in large part because for the nearly 25 years that I've known you, I would have never described you as shy. Take me back to that 8-year-old, and how did he overcome his shyness to become a star in a profession that isn't geared toward people who are shy?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I'm very grateful that I grew up when I grew up because, shyness was not a bad thing when I was a kid. It was not something to kind of be, you had your challenges, but you could be shy and you could still function in the world. And you still can. It's just harder now. But I've always attributed it to Thoreau, but I don't know if it was Thoreau. But I thought it was Thoreau that said you should always do the thing you're afraid to do. And that really resonated with me when I was becoming a young adult, because I realized that I'd spent most of my life not doing things that I wanted to try to do because I was afraid. I was afraid of failure. I was afraid of rejection. And that's just not a way to live. And so I have tried. I haven't always succeeded, but I have tried much more as an adult to lean into the things that you're afraid to do, that you're not sure you can do. One of the biggest things that I did in my adult life was leave the Washington Post. I could have stayed there for 30 years. I was on a track to be a columnist there at some point in my life, and I could have covered, the sports that you have to cover to become a columnist, and done that and had a perfectly good career. But I realized that I wanted to try to do more. I thought I was capable of doing more. And so when ESPN called, and this is different now, this is 1996. This is not ESPN today. This is ESPN 30 years ago, which was still very big, but not anything near the behemoth it is now. So it was a risk, right? It was a risk to leave a legacy newspaper to go work for a television network that some, but not all people watched. But I said to myself, you've got to get out of your comfort zone and work for different people and try something different. And so I did. And it worked out, reasonably well for the time I was there. But that was one of the big things, Ash. I just had to kind of decide, okay, what kind of life do you want to have? I'll tell you this. I mean, it's not a secret to anybody that has a picture of me 30 years ago. I weighed a lot more than I do now. And I said, you know what? I don't want to live like this. And so I said, you got to be uncomfortable. You got to start going to the gym and eating better, getting more sleep. And I did. And it's been pretty successful over the last several decades. And, these are choices, but you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. I know that's a cliche, but that's where I've tried to live more days than not as an adult.
That's amazing. And it's funny, you mentioned your weight. I had completely forgotten about that because I see you as just, how you look now.
Yeah.
That seems like a different person.
I've burned most of those pictures. So there's very little photographic proof.
We can always ask Mr. Google about that.
I'm sure they're out there somewhere. There's always one or two.
You're a DC kid, lifer.
I am.
Yep. Went to DeMatha Catholic High School and then American University. What was that path like for you?
Well, the high school, it's kind of weird. People have asked me, why'd you go to DeMatha? Because DeMatha's pretty synonymous with basketball. It's been a great basketball program for 50 years. And they always go, well, did you want to play basketball there? No, I suck at basketball. I'm terrible at it. No, I'm not any good at it. So to this day, I have no idea why I went to DeMatha. None, zero. I knew I was going to go to a private high school because my teachers, when I was, in DC, they have junior high school, which is 7 through 9. And I guess other people call it middle school, but it's junior high school in DC. And my teachers were pretty adamant. They were like, you should go to a private high school and, because they just have better opportunities for you. So I knew I was doing that. All my friends that I grew up with went to another private Catholic high school, which was much closer to where we lived than I did. I have no idea why I went to DeMatha. None. I'm glad I did because it really did kind of open up parts of the world that I wouldn't have seen otherwise. But I don't know why. I know exactly why I went to American because it's the only way I could go to college. I had applied to 4 colleges. I got into all 4. They all offered me money, but there was a gap with the other 3 schools. And the only reason I went to American is because I could live at home. I could commute. I didn't have to pay room and board because I couldn't afford room and board. So that's why I went to American. And again, it worked out great. I mean, it was a defining chapter in my life was going to American. And I'm glad I did. But that was it. And then, again, incredibly good fortune. I was able to work at the Washington Post right out of college. And I know that that's insane. I know it's crazy. It's not something that most kids get to do. I was 22 years old. I had just graduated from American University and working full time at the Washington Post. That just does not happen. I was very lucky. I had a boss that believed in me, gave me an opportunity to intern there for the summer and did a lot of work there. And they took a chance on somebody that worked hard. And that's the only reason they hired me. I'm convinced to this day. And I'm glad they did. And so after that point, you're like, well, you're here. You might as well stay here. There's no point in leaving. So I've been in DC my whole life. It's where I feel the most comfortable. I feel safe here. It's home.
Mm-hmm. I got bit by the journalism bug, I think when I was 14. And you know this, I'm the daughter of a former head men's basketball coach in the Atlantic Coast Conference. So I kind of came about it naturally. But I took a journalism class in high school, and that was it for me. Sophomore year of high school. Did you have like a defining moment when you said, hey, not only do I want to be a sports writer, but I want to be covering the NBA in particular?
Well, that came later, but I mean, the journalism piece came in high school too. I had my homeroom teacher, my English teacher for 2 years, Joe Carroll, was a great influence on me in high school. Was demanding without being pedantic about it. Pushed us to think and read and and was the advisor to the student newspaper at DeMatha, and encouraged me to work there and write there. And we didn't, it was a it's a high school newspaper. It didn't come out all that often, and it was subject to extreme editing by the principal and by the administration. But it was journalism. It was my first attempt to write about something that I saw, or to write about someone that I talked to. So that's kind of the rudimentary beginnings of journalism. And I thought, wow, I kind of like this. I kind of think this is cool. But I always say, Ash, again, when I went to AU, I liked being a journalist. When I went to American, I knew I had to be a journalist when I left American. Because I really believed when I got there, I thought I'm going to be a high school history teacher because I love history. And I'm pretty good at communicating. So I thought, well, I can explain these concepts to teenage kids. And I like trying to explain things to people. So I'm going to do that. But I was on the school paper for 4 years at AU, and it was not subject to administrative editing. It was all us. And I just fell in love with the process. I fell in love with the process of every week you start at zero, and you got to put the work in to put something on a page that comes out in 5 days. What are you going to do? And I just fell in love with it. And I still am in love with it. And that's what kind of galvanized me to wanting to be a professional journalist. The sports thing came very late when I was at AU. It came my senior year because a friend of mine was already interning at the Post and had said you should call them because they're looking for kids to cover high school sports. And so I called the guy. He happened to be an AU grad, so he cut me a break and gave me a chance to work there while I was still at school my senior year. So I covered high school football and basketball for the Post, and that was my entry point into the Post. And after that, I was like, I have to do this. I don't know where I'm going to do it, but I have to do this. I love the process of chronicling what's going on in the world and trying to get people to understand why this is important. So it was a romance, and I'm still in love.
It's a long romance. Congratulations.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, you worked at the Post and then made the leap to ESPN, where you became an NBA insider. Yeah. I had Steve Weich of the NFL Network, and a fellow friend of us both, was a guest on OUTFOXED recently, and noted how insiders, regardless of the sport, whether it's the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, then and now, are predominantly white males.
Yep.
You obviously are not a white male, and yet were an NBA insider. What obstacles did you face, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I mean, there were numerous. One is, well, I mean this. I'm not being flippant in this. It's hard if you didn't have an athletic background. Like if you didn't play somewhere, like people might know you. They might know you from high school or college or the pros if you're incredibly gifted. But, I came from none of that. I came from a journalism background. I came from a newspaper that was new in television back then. Guys like Ralph Wiley and Brian Burwell had kind of been the first to take that step and be in that space. Peter Gammons and Chris Mortensen were kind of the first stars, right, in that space, who came from newspapers. So that part was new. There's no question that most GMs and coaches never have had to answer questions from someone who looked like me, ever. And someone who had the authority of working for a network that they had to pay attention to. That was a challenge for them. It was less of a challenge for me because that's what I have always been doing. But you figure out quickly who you can trust. And there were people that to this day, I consider, I don't know if I consider them friends. I think that's a bit much. And I hope one of the things that troubles me about our business is that too many reporters want to be friends with the people that they cover. And I don't think we should ever be friends with the people that we cover. It doesn't mean we should be, mean to them or unfair to them, but there has to be a line. There has to be an understanding that I am a reporter and you are the athlete subject, or the person subject. And I don't know that we can be friends because it's hard for me to be critical of my friends, and certainly in public, right? So, and part of my job is that I have to be critical on occasion. So that was different. But I think, Ash, I'd like to think that, over the course of my career in this business, that people come to understand that they can trust me, that I'm not going to take cheap shots at them, that I don't need to be on TV screaming all the time or, bloviating or giving opinions or hot takes or all of those things that are rampant in our business right now, that I just want to do my job. And once they understand that that's where you're coming from, a lot of people kind of let their guard down a little bit, and it got easier, but it wasn't easy. It still isn't easy. You have to ask uncomfortable questions, sometimes about race and sometimes about gender and sometimes about sexuality. I mean, these are all things that we have to talk about in our business. We have to bring them up because they do come up. And so if you come to people honestly, and I try to do that, and I try to be upfront with people about what I want to write about and the things that I'm interested in, a lot more people than not will meet you halfway, and will try to be as honest as they can with you. Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is I can't talk about it. That's okay. But I try to be upfront with people about everything that I want to write about. And again, I think more people than not are willing to try to have a conversation with you about some difficult subjects sometimes.
Is there one that stands out that you can talk about that was difficult, whether it was about race, gender,
Sure.
sexuality?
Yeah.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, when I was at the Post, I did a story on race relations inside the Washington, they were the Redskins then, locker room. Well, I was curious about it. I was curious about the idea. And football, to me, is different from most other sports because football requires not just sacrifice, but literally physically sacrificing your body to play the sport. I mean, football players die earlier than other athletes do because the sport requires so much of them physically. And so when you talk about concepts like teamwork and brotherhood, that can't just be talk in an NFL locker room. That's, those are guys that are dying to play football. And so you have to really believe that the guy next to you is your brother, because otherwise, why would you do this? You know what I mean? It's funny. I was just talking yesterday to a guy in the Commanders locker room. They are now the Commanders. And he was pointing out that, a lot of guys in the NFL play for the money. And that's the only reason they play is for the money. And he said, you got to get past that. If you're ever going to be successful as a team, you can't just play for the paycheck. You have to play because you really care about the guy next to you, and that's what I wanted to get at with this story. And I spent 6 months on it, talking to players up and down the roster, the star players to the absolute nobodies. One of the guys I interviewed was Terry Crews, who is now, known for being on TV, an actor, and he's been a host of all these different shows. I don't know which show he hosts now, but he's had this second act. But when I talked to him, he was a special teams linebacker for the Washington Redskins. And so I talked to a lot of people about it, and it wasn't easy. And guys were reluctant at first to talk about it. But I think when they understood that this is not, I'm not here to call you a racist. I want to know what you actually think about these things, And it was one of the best stories I've ever written. I was very proud of that story because it gave an honest, and this was right around the time of the OJ trial. So that was a whole different, I injected a whole different thing into the discourse, right? So, but I was very proud of that story because I said I set out to do this thing that was really difficult to write about, and I accomplished it. And I felt like I was fair to everybody, and that's what that's the kind of journalism that I like to be a part of.
I love it. We met, I want to say around 2000, 2001. I was covering the Philadelphia 76ers and you were still at ESPN. And I've talked about this a lot. Like, I was very fortunate to have a group of allies, as I call them, who really kind of showed me the game. And I'm not talking about the NBA game. I'm like talking about the game of dealing with athletes, coaches, general managers, owners, and it was Michael Wilbon, Brian Burwell, Steve Weich, and you. And I would have never had the success that I had were it not for, you guys really looking out for me and taking care of me. And, I've always said, I went through things. You guys, as a female, you guys went through things as Black men. And I would never say that they're the same, but I think they are, cousins somewhat.
Yeah.
How did you navigate that in addition to being, upfront and honest and not taking pot shots? There had to be a learning curve there for you as well.
Oh, sure. Look, I'm very fortunate that I got to cover the NBA. The NBA of all the leagues was always the most progressive, was always the most welcoming to people of color, to Black men especially. I always wondered what it would be like if I had to cover college football, which has this structure to it that I don't think would be as welcoming to me. So, hopefully I'm wrong. I don't know. But I've thought about that a lot. When I started covering the league, it was when you first started to see former Black players become general managers. And that was a big thing. Like, you could call, whether it was Willis Reed or Wes Unseld or other people that were in decision-making capabilities and authority and looked like you, right? And that was a big deal. That was a big deal. It helped a lot. But it wasn't easy, Ash. There was still a lot of racism in the NBA. There still is a lot of racism in the NBA. When you look at the opportunities that are afforded to Black coaches, the opportunities to fail and then to get another opportunity, but you can't, you can give in and say, this is too hard. It's too racist. It's too bad. I can't do this. Or you can keep working. Like, I don't know any other way to do this. Like, my dad worked 2 jobs pretty much his whole adult life. And so I have no excuse. My mom worked until she died. I have no excuse not to work. So that's how I look at it. Because that's how I was taught. Like, you got to earn what you get. So you keep working at it. I was incredibly lucky to be covering the league at the time when not only were there, Black people getting to be coaches and GMs, but the league exploded in popularity, with the Magic Bird era, followed by the Michael era, followed by the Iverson era. The league just kept growing in popularity. And so there was more resources put into it. That's why ESPN hired me, because they knew they needed somebody to cover the NBA full time as an insider. They didn't have anybody. So they saw it, in 1996. And so I was lucky to be covering the league when it was really becoming popular, really becoming mainstream. And obviously Stern had a huge piece to do with that. But that gave me entree. And ESPN gave me entree, and the Washington Post gave me entree, and people who would probably not have called me back because of where I worked. And again, through that process, they got to see that I could be trusted and that we could have adult conversations without it being in the paper the next day. And so that was very fortunate. But Ash, I say this not to pat you on the back or anything. Like, what I went through pales in comparison to what women go through in this business. It's not even, I don't even think it's in the same ballpark, to be honest with you. I mean, the things that you have to endure to do your job every day are things that I never have to worry about, ever. I don't have to worry about them. They're not even part of the universe. They're not part of the air when I'm talking to somebody. Whereas, women talking to athletes, it's a completely different deal. So the people that have survived and have thrived in this business, that's why if I was of help to you, I'm glad I was of help to you. But I think we all understand, like, you have it 10 times worse than we do, and we have it pretty bad. So what must you be going through? Like, so that's why you put an arm around somebody that would say, come on, I'll show you. Here, talk to this person, he's important, or talk to her, she's important, and you look out for people. That's all. Like, people looked out for me. Wilbon looked out for me. Burwell looked out for me. Ralph Wiley looked out for me. The people that came before me looked out for me, and told people, hey, you can talk to this kid. He's okay. And that got me an opportunity, gave me a chance, and so you pay it forward. It's not a cliche. You pay it forward, because I owe people forever that gave me a chance, that gave me an opportunity. And I can never pay back what the people who gave me a chance when I was nobody and nobody knew who I was, offered to me.
I pay it forward too, because I owe a vast amount. Yes. DA, after ESPN, you transitioned to Turner and was part of the crew that included Ernie Johnson, Shaq, Charles Barkley, Kenny the Jet Smith, which I'm sure we will agree is the greatest studio team of all time, regardless of sport. Who's the funnier guy of those four?
Of that group?
Yeah.
Oh, Chuck. Oh, it's not close. Chuck. No, I mean, seriously. I mean, this. You're in Philly. You know Chuck. I mean, so no. Charles is the most. I've never met someone as famous as Charles who is as comfortable being famous as Charles is. Like, I just don't. I don't understand how he does this. How he lives his life the way he lives it. It's as open as you could possibly expect. Like, and there's no strangers in Charles's world. There's just people he hasn't met yet, right? So, no, he's the secret sauce. He's the show. He's the thing that makes it work. It wouldn't have worked without him. I mean, they would have done a good show, but it wouldn't have worked to the level that you're talking about, which is truth, that it's the greatest studio show in the history of television. And it's not close. This isn't close. This isn't even debatable to me. Like, there's nothing even in the same universe as Inside the NBA. So, they are amazing. Ernie Johnson is amazing. He's the best studio host I've ever seen. So again, that's what I'm saying. They would have done a good show because Ernie's really good. And Tim Kiley, who's now back as producer, is really good. But Charles is the one that makes it work because Charles allowed people to laugh at him. And you don't know how difficult it is. Well, because you're in the business, but people at Charles's level as an athlete, it's very difficult for them to laugh at themselves. That's a hard thing to get them to do. To go, oh, I'm full of crap. You know what I mean? Like, that's a hard thing. They don't do that very often, and they certainly don't do it publicly, right? So for Charles to let people on the show make fun of his weight and make fun of the fact that he doesn't really care about the NBA, and joke about his eyebrows and everything, like that doesn't happen Michael Jordan doesn't do that. Okay. Magic doesn't do that. Bird doesn't do that. Isaiah doesn't do that. They don't allow themselves to be the butt of the joke ever. It's why they're the people that they were. But Charles has never stopped being able to laugh at himself. And that's why that show works. That's why it's worked for 30 years. Because he lets everybody in. And so you never feel like you're a stranger, right? You always feel like you're part of the team. You're part of the group. You're, one of Charles's friends, one of his 7 billion friends that he had, and so that it's an amazing show. It was an amazing run there for 14 years. It's the best place I ever worked. They took away every excuse I had not to work my ass off. They put you in really nice hotels. They fly you first class. They have car service everywhere. Everybody behind the scenes is devoted to making you look good. They don't care about themselves. It's just, it was a great time to be a Turner. I was so blessed and fortunate that Jeff Benke, gave me a chance. I can't express to you how important that time in my life was to make me feel good about myself again, because it was hard leaving ESPN. That was wasn't by my choice. It's difficult, but it happens to everybody. You stay, as I've come to realize, Ashley, and I say this to young people all the time, that's the reference is dated, but you will understand this because somebody at ABC one day woke up and fired Ted Koppel. So if they can fire Ted Koppel, they surely can fire me. Okay. So, so that's how you kind of have to think about television. It's television. You're hired to be fired. You're not going to be there that long. So you have to understand that to leave with any sense of self or worth. So Turner helped me at a really bad point in my life, and I'm eternally grateful to them for believing in me and for letting me do my job the way I wanted to do it, and for never second guessing the way I wanted to do my job and letting me be me, letting me cover the league the way I wanted to cover the league. And that empowering is so, it gives you so much self-confidence that you can do anything and you can really overcome any obstacle.
Well, and I also was shown the door at ESPN before I was ready, for sure. It definitely,
right.
I say all the time, it doesn't leave scars necessarily, but I am calloused pretty good given that experience.
That's a good way. Yep. That's a good way of putting it.
Yep. When you left Turner for The Athletic DC, you wrote of The Athletic co-founders, they hired me to run one of those cities. That opportunity is not afforded to people of color very often. Mm-hmm. That was 2018?
2018. Yep.
It's 2024. Are we still in the same spot?
Well, generally, yes. The Athletic has it's pivoted, to be honest. We don't really do the city thing much anymore. There's a few of us that still kind of have a hand in covering the teams in our cities. I'm one of them. But there's not many of us left. They have adopted kind of a more national thinking model, which is, it's different ownership now. They have different priorities. They have different measures of success, and you have to kind of adapt. You have to understand that it's different now, and it's okay. But what they have done is grandfathered a few of us in that I still want to write about the Commanders like I did yesterday, and I still want to write about the Nationals if they make a big move. And Ovechkin looks like he wants to break Gretzky's record this year, so I may have to go to a hockey game or two before the season's over. And they're cool about that. They're not, that's not the business model anymore. But for the few of us that still like to do that, they allow us to do that. And I'm grateful that they still allow me to do that. And so, but to the larger question, no, it's still as bad as ever in terms of Black people, especially women, getting opportunities to be sports editors. You can literally count them on one hand still around the country that are given that opportunity, that have that opportunity now to be sports editors, to be program directors, at TV stations, and to make those big decisions about who gets hired and who doesn't. And, it's still, just whether it's APSE or Richard Lapchick's group down at Central Florida that does the racial report cards every year on not just sports leagues and teams, but sports media, the numbers are still horrendous. They're awful, and you keep asking why, and they keep saying, "Oh, we can't find anybody." Well, then you're looking in the wrong places, aren't you? You can't find anybody because there's people out there that you have to look a little harder and be a little more intentional in your desire to do this. And it's one of the reasons, Ash, that I'm eternally grateful to George Solomon at the Post, because when George was there were no focus groups telling George that he had to have a diverse staff. There were no protests saying the Post must hire more Black sports writers. No, it's just George Solomon saying, we need to be diverse. I need to hire women. I need to hire Black people. I need to hire Black women. I need to do that because it's the right thing to do. That's all. That doesn't mean we don't hire white men. We've got a lot of white men covering sports here. But we also have a couple of Black guys covering sports. We also have a couple of women covering sports. And in the mid 80s, in the late 80s, that was not the norm at most sports departments. It was not the norm for Christine Brennan to be covering the Redskins as the beat writer. It was not the norm for me to be covering the Bullets as a kid. It was not the norm for Mike Wilbon to have a column, in 1995, 94, whatever he got the column. That wasn't normal, and George did that. And that's why it rings a little hollow when people continually say, well, we can't find people. George found them 30 years ago, 40 years ago, almost now. Why can't you find them? He just gave people a chance. He didn't guarantee that I was going to be good. All he did was give me a chance. And it's up to me. That's all we want. A chance to show you what I can do. And if I'm not good enough, get rid of me. So that's why I get frustrated with the pace of hiring, because there's people who were doing it a long time ago when it was far less popular to do it than it is now. And so please, you're doing this the way you're doing it because this is the way you want to do it. And at least be honest about that instead of, this pablum we keep getting fed every year about the incredible lack of candidates that I have to do these jobs. Then shake other trees. The tree you're shaking isn't working anymore. Shake another tree.
Yep. Go look somewhere else.
Yeah.
If you look in the same place, you're going to find the same answer.
That's right.
So you have covered the NBA for, a lifetime.
Long time.
Do you have a favorite player? Do you have a favorite moment? I mean, I get asked all the time, even last week, like, who was the most difficult player you ever had to deal with, athlete you ever had to deal with? And it was like, Allen Iverson. Not, didn't even have to think.
Yeah.
And that's, we can have a whole other discussion about him because I love him and have tons of thoughts on him. But for you, like, do you have a favorite? Do you have a most difficult? Do you have most impactful?
I mean, those are all different areas and, different times in my life, honestly. I think the Dream Team is the greatest thing I've ever covered. Like, I can't imagine covering something better than that. It was the one time, well, it was the first time, I'll change that. It was the first time that I advocated for myself, that I went into my boss's office and said, I am covering that team. Do not put anybody else on that. That's mine. And my boss said, you got it. It's yours. So it was, an incredible group to cover all the way through the Olympics. It was amazing watching that team play basketball. And just kind of knowing the impact that they were having on the rest of the world in terms of wanting to be as good as the dream team. So that was a memory that I will always have. I don't know that individual players, I don't know. I mean, there's lots of teams that I liked watching. I mean, I really did like the San Antonio team in 2014 that beat Miami in the finals. And it was a year after that devastating loss to the Heat in the finals, the Ray Allen 3 and losing game 7 and all that. That was as tough emotionally to come back from as any defeat that I can think of. And they leaned all the way into it. It's famously Greg Popovich made them watch game 6 over and over again to find out what went wrong. Why did we choke, frankly? And own it, right? And so they came back and they just dominated everybody, and then they destroyed Miami that next year. And because they played basketball to me the way it should be played. That's how I like watching basketball being played. When the ball's moving, when you don't know who's going to shoot the ball, it doesn't matter who shoots the ball. And everybody trusts everybody else. And they were beautiful to watch. Beautiful to watch. Individually, I mean, I covered the Klay Thompson game in Oklahoma City in 2016. I mean, it's the greatest individual shooting performance I've ever seen. Like, it just did not matter how well Oklahoma City played that night. And they played really well that night. Klay Thompson just was not going to lose that game that night. If it had required him to make 43s that night, he would have made 43s. He just wasn't going to miss. And that was unbelievable. As great as Steph is, he's the best shooter of all time. The best shooting performance I've ever seen was Klay Thompson in Game 6 in Oklahoma City. It was incredible because you just could not believe how willing he was to take the shots. Like these are if I miss this, we might lose. We'll get eliminated tonight. And so that's a big piano on your back for most people. And he just kept shooting, and kept making. So, I'm sure I could think of, you give me enough time, I could think of 20 other things. Those are the ones that immediately come to mind. Uh-huh. But it's been, I love covering this league. I love covering the people in this league. It just feels like normal, feels like home to me. Always does.
So who's the GOAT, David?
It's Jordan. That's not even debatable.
All right. No, I ask because, I have a son, you have 2 sons, and my son is 15, 6'3" and a half, size 15 shoe, big basketball guy. And he's like all over me all the time because they don't know. I mean, he watches enough YouTube to know of Jordan and see his highlights, but he's like, it's LeBron. So I always like to get, not to date us because I'm with you. It's MJ, no question.
It's perfectly okay if people think it's LeBron. That's okay. They're wrong, but it's okay if they think it. LeBron has a case. Like, he has a case. It's not like it's a ridiculous argument. He does have a case, given his body of work over a longer period of time than Jordan played, his excellence over that entire run. I will say, the one thing I will say about LeBron that I don't think Michael can claim is that LeBron was under the microscope from the second he came into the league, and he's lived up to all of it. He's lived up to every bit of the attention and scrutiny that he's received from the time he was 18 years old coming out of St. Vincent St. Mary's High School. Like, he's been that good. He really has been that good. Like, and he should take all the flowers for that, right? He should get all his flowers for that. But if you're asking me who's the best basketball player I've ever seen, it's Michael Jordan. It's not particularly close. Michael Jordan. He's the best I've ever seen. Like,
agreed.
I can't imagine an argument for somebody being better than him. He didn't just win games. He dominated games. He dominated teams. He destroyed franchises. He obliterated franchises. Like people don't remember how good the Cavaliers were in the early 90s. They were really good. A really good basketball team. And if they had played in any other era, they probably would have won a couple of NBA championships. They were that good. And he just dismissed them.
I was going to say, they couldn't beat Cavaliers. The Bulls.
Get out of here, Cleveland Cavaliers. You're not good enough. Also, look, he was, when I started coming to the league, he wasn't quite as good defensively as he was when he first came into the league, but he was still really good defensively and offensively. He was that guy, but it's beyond that. It's the mental part, the will part that separates him from everybody else. As just nobody that had a will like he did to dominate other people, to destroy other people, including people on his own team, if they weren't tough enough, and that's why they won 6. I mean, I understand Scotty being frustrated that he never got his due, but people who saw them, they know how great this guy was great. He wasn't good. He was great. Great player. That's the reason why he's in the Hall of Fame. It's the reason why he's top 75 of all time, because he was that good. But he became that good, I believe, playing next to Michael Jordan, who demanded he become as good as he could be. And Scotty did become as good as he could be. But I don't know that would have happened playing in Houston. Well, I know he played in Houston at the end, but I mean, playing in Detroit. I don't know if that would have happened there. I know it happened in Chicago, and I think it happened because he realized for me to be the best I can be, I have to figure out how to play with this guy. Mm-hmm. And he did. And he did. To his credit, to Scotty's credit, he did. Because a lot of guys didn't. A lot of guys couldn't. They couldn't handle it. Scotty handled it. And so I have big respect for Scotty for that. But it starts with 23. Starts and ends with 23. That's all I'm saying.
I agree. I have a great picture because I met him when he was still at the University of North Carolina, and I was like 14 or 13 and had really bad hair. And he had like the huge grin and was actually holding one of his shoes that had just come out. That's how long ago it was. Okay. It's pretty cool. What's been a bigger thrill, being David Aldridge on TV or being David Aldridge on TV on NBA 2K?
Well, it's interesting. It's a whole new world for me, right? It's weird. Like I always respected, I don't know if respect's the right word. I always appreciated that Madonna could reinvent herself over and over and over and over again. Like I thought, God, that takes a lot of skill to understand. Well, I can't be the person I was 10 years ago. I have to be different now to still be relevant, right? So the 2K thing is a total accident. It wasn't anything I planned. It was an accident. Kevin Harlan's the reason I'm on 2K. He's the guy that got me in. I say that all the time because it's the truth. And, he recommended me to the powers that be at 2K. And now there's no one under 25 that knows I was a writer at all. Nobody. I have no idea. I worked at the Washington Post for 10 years. Almost none of them know I worked at ESPN. A few of them still remember I worked at Turner. But it's okay. It's okay to meet them at this stage of my life, right? It's okay for them to know me as this 2K guy, so it's fine. It's a little weird, but it's fine, because it is a video game, but I understand that people play it. Millions of people play it. I'm grateful. It's helped me put my 2 children through college. I'm very grateful. So that's how they know me. That's fine. That's okay. It makes me feel like I'm still part of the gang, part of the Turner gang. So it's all good.
Yes, well, that's how my son knows you. So you're right about that.
Okay.
All right. So here at OUTFOXED, we close with a couple of questions that we ask everyone. I'll start. There's 3 total. Number 1, if you could give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be, DA?
Don't be so hard on yourself. You're going to be okay.
I like that. Yes, my brother calls me an insecure overachiever because I think we all are very hard on ourselves, for sure.
Yes.
You wrote in the Athletic, quote, "I love the NBA and could have covered it for the rest of my life, my working life. But I certainly hope I can do more in life than ask Greg Popovich 2 questions at the end of the 3rd quarter."
Right.
I thought was pretty funny. And I know Pop is challenging, so that's not for nothing. What is the elusive thing for which you're still striving? What's still out there?
I mean, I would love to. I have a book behind me, by the way. That's coming out November 100 from the Athletic. Buy it. John Hollinger.
Well, show it to us. Come on. Let's selfless.
There it is. Selfless self-promotion. There it is.
There you go.
100. It's me. It's me and John Hollinger. So I want to write like 2 or 3 more of these about different things. There's different ideas I have in my head. Some are sports, some are not at all sports, that I want to, hopefully in the years I have left, try to get 3 or 4 more books out. That's really, I love the process of kind of researching something in great depth and going back and looking at old newspaper clips and, old interviews and really understanding. Because again, I was a history major at AU and I love finding out what actually happened. Why did this thing that we don't know much about actually happen? Because I have a very dear friend of mine who's a history professor that I've known for my whole adult life. And she always says, no matter what subject you're talking about, you must understand it's a lot more complicated than you think. And they've been working on it a lot longer than you know. So, that's kind of how I look at things like, there's a reason why we are the way we are. We should probably examine that, right? We should probably think about why is this country the way it is? There's a reason. There are reasons. We should know them, right? So in my small area of expertise, I'd like to examine some of those things if I have the opportunity.
Well, congratulations on the book.
Thanks.
That's quite an endeavor. So I will buy it for sure.
There you go.
All right.
I'll send you a copy. You don't have to buy it.
It's a great Christmas present, David, right?
There you go. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm not sure if you know this, but here at OUTFOXED, we focus on mostly sports with soul. Mm-hmm. What does soul mean to you in terms of your career and your life?
I am... Everything that I've accomplished in my life is because of James and Muriel Aldridge. Everything. And so when I think about, the way I was brought up and the time I was brought up, I'm, again, grateful is always the word I come up with. I grew up in a working class Black neighborhood in Northeast Washington, D.C., full of people who got in their cars or got in a bus and went to work every day. And that is the ethos in which I was raised. My dad was a mailman. My mom was a registered nurse. She was a pediatric emergency room nurse. And they went to work every day. And so when I think about soul, I guess, I really think about that. I think about the people that came before me that made it easier for me and that made my life possible. I didn't know, both of my grandfathers died before I was born. And that's just kind of the reality of life with a lot of Black families. We die earlier. Certainly did 50 years ago, 60 years ago. I didn't know either of my grandfathers. I wish I had. I missed that connection. But I always think about this, Ash. I always think about if I had to explain to my grandfathers what it is I do for a living, they would look at me like I have three heads. Like, go, wait, you do what? You write about sports? And they pay you money for that? Like, it's insane. So I think about the swath of my life, the two generations of my life, and it's completely changed. The expectations and the possibilities for my kids. I think about that all the time. And it wouldn't have happened if my grandparents' generation and my parents' generation hadn't laid down those markers and sacrifices. So that when I think about soul, that's what I think about. I think about those souls that worked so hard so that I would have a chance to do better. And that's why I'm just maniacal about the idea you have to work for what you get in life. You can't, it's not going to be given to you. You have to go get it. You have to go earn it, and it's part of me. It's ingrained in me.
Beautiful. Thank you, David. Appreciate having you as a guest. Yes, thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, be well. Good luck with the book.
Thanks.
OUTFOXED is a mostly sports podcast with soul. Hosted by me, Ashley Fox. OUTFOXED is proudly produced in Philadelphia by Dearest Media in collaboration with Blow My Mind podcast.